Welcome to Feminism Today, everyone. I'm Sophia Johnson in New York. LGBT people are nearly 4 times more likely than non-LGBT people to experience violent victimization, including rape, sexual assault, and aggravated or simple assault. And that's according to a new study by the Williams Institute at the UCLA School of Law. Researchers found that between 2017 and 2020, the rates of violent victimization were significantly higher for persons aged 16 or older who self-identified as lesbian, gay, or bisexual than for those who identified as straight. In addition, persons who identified as lesbians or gay experienced 43.5 victimizations per 1,000 persons aged 16 or older, more than twice the rate among persons who identified as straight. To understand what may feel like the best and worst of times, we're joined now by Nadine Bridges, Executive Director of One Colorado, a Colorado-based LGBT advocacy organization. Nadine Bridges, welcome to Feminism Today.
Thanks for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
I'm glad. So the UCLA School report that I just referenced was based on data published by the National Crime Victimization Survey, the first nationally representative and comprehensive criminal victimization data to include information on the sexual orientation and gender identity of respondents. How do these data, these facts, sort of settle on you in terms of where we are as a nation? Also, I'm curious, can you help us define and understand what hate crime really means?
Yeah, I think I'll start with your last question there. And what is a hate crime? And this is how I'm not an attorney, so there's definitely a lot of nuance that goes into this. But the reality is if you are intentionally attacking someone based off of a marginalized community member based off of their identity, it can be considered as a hate crime. So some of the statistics that you mentioned, if someone of a privileged identity in particular, but it doesn't always have to be the situation, if they are attacking a transgender woman of color because they are a transgender woman of color, then that could be considered a hate crime. If you are attacking a young gay male or a gay male in general, because you believe, or it doesn't matter what you believe, actually, because they are a gay male, that could be considered a hate crime. But there is a lot of nuance to that. And I'm certainly not an attorney to kind of, discern the nuance.
Mm-hmm. To the second question, where we are as a nation?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We certainly have fought hard, and when I say we, the LGBTQIA community, and we fought hard for our rights. And, I think many folks would assume particularly because of marriage equality, mm-hmm. that the LGBTQ community is okay. We are recognizing and seeing that is not the case. There are folks who are intentionally harming our community. There are folks who are intentionally putting out legislation to harm transgender, non-binary, gender expansive folks. They're using young people as a way to get attention for their own gain. And it's sad, and it's harmful.
Mm-hmm. Now, to your point, 2021 was certainly the deadliest year for transgender and gender nonconforming people since the Human Rights Campaign began keeping count back in 2013. Can we talk about the political discourse and the potential impacts of anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric and policies from local school boards to Congress?
Yeah, and I want to be able to separate that out, right? Because anti-LGB, particularly for cisgender folks, is very different than anti-transgender rhetoric, right? And both of those are happening. And sometimes folks conflate the issues.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that there are many folks who empower political leaders, administrators, community members who are, using any type of anti-transgender rhetoric to get attention. Anything from saying that they're groomers or pedophiles or worse. And you hear some of that language as well in the,
Mm-hmm.
the LGBT side. We see that many schools are trying to censor inclusive books and magazines. We see that there's intentional bans for athletes, in particular student athletes, transgender student athletes. They are attacking us. And at the same time, we see issues such as Club Q. And although we don't know specifically the motive of the person who murdered these people in Colorado Springs, the reality is that we know that type of rhetoric creates a foundation for people to do harm.
Mm-hmm. For decades, to your point, Colorado Spring has been the unofficial seat of Christian conservatives in America. It's the home of the influential focus on families, major mega churches. And for a number of years, the presidency of the National Association of Evangelicals was based there. What is the relationship, or what has been the relationship between Christian groups and the LGBTQ plus community?
It's right. So I would define it as authentic Christianity versus inauthentic.
Mm.
There are authentic Christians out there who are inclusive, kind, supportive, and uplifting. And I give my heart to them. They have worked really, really hard to make sure that faith and Christianity is not causing trauma to the community. And I applaud them for that. However, there's a small voice of loud people who call themselves Christians, who most certainly building their base off of harming and saying negative narratives about the community. I would say, and that those are not in the basis of what I would hope would be a message of love and uplifting movement. Harming and saying negative things, banning LGBTQ teachers from Catholic schools. That's not Christianity in the way that I would want or understood it to be. I'm not a religious person. I'm a spiritual person, so I want to put that out there before anybody says, "Well, who are you to judge?" I do understand love and kindness, and ensuring that people thrive. And when you're attacking people, when you're harming their mental health or even their physical health, that's not based in love or any type of religion that I would want to put my arms around.
True that, true that. Last year, the Boulder County District Attorney, Michael Doherty, shared survey results showing 3 of 10 adults in Colorado experienced a hate crime. What's especially important here, the survey was conducted by Hate Free Colorado, a coalition of over 18 members of civil rights and advocacy groups across Colorado and 7 law enforcement partners. It found basically that the number of people in Colorado who experience hate crimes or bias motivated incidents in the last 5 years is actually higher than the official data that I'm referencing from the US Justice Department. What's your sense of what's going on, or what makes this experience unique to Colorado?
I think Colorado is unique, as you mentioned. This is there's a central ground for many conservative religious groups, and I think that they are, intentionally using Colorado to be, for lack of a better way, kind of like a pilot of, what they could potentially, I think they can do. And when you again start to, especially during a time right after the pandemic, many folks were isolated. There's a lot of folks who are disenfranchised. You start to blame. We've seen this historically. You blame the most vulnerable and use them as your whipping boy. And I think that's I would have to dig into more of the data. But my sense is that they're creating fear and anger and disconnection to all communities, not just LGBTQ plus communities, but immigrant populations, Black and Brown communities, Asian communities, and we have to do a better job of connecting folks and stop isolating them, so that they're and create a space for them to connect with many people and not only listen to these very specific types of people who are being intentional around their messaging.
Yeah. The district attorney's office has actually joined forces. The district attorney's office in Colorado has actually joined forces with Hate Free Coalition. And with the help of from Boulder County, they've established this hotline, this non-emergency hotline, to expand training opportunities for law enforcement, but also to create some connection with the community. I wonder if this is the next best step forward in terms of how best to sort of deal with some of these intractable problems on the ground.
Yeah, I think One Colorado is a part of Hate Free Colorado, and I think that this is a collective effort, from law enforcement to first responders to the district attorneys to prosecutors, to our legislators. We all need to work together along with community, again, to create a space of caring and kindness. What I say quite a bit is that, rather than attacking transgender, non-binary, and gender expansive folks, shouldn't these leaders be talking about the economy? They should be talking about lack of housing. They should be talking about food deserts. They should be talking about equitable education, so that we can best serve this country, and so that we can best serve our communities. And the only way that we can do that is to collectively get together, hold folks accountable, and create safe spaces, brave spaces, safe spaces where our community can be seen and heard, understand the power in their voice, and know that they'll be protected when harm does come their way.
Now, Hate Free Colorado, founded in 2017, and to the point that you just raised, there's a fair bit of collaboration going on in terms of the non-state actors, these non-governmental organizations. How much of the work that you do through One Colorado relies on community collaboration?
Yeah, everything that we do relies on community collaboration. We're an advocacy organization. We've been around for over 10 years. We started out with marriage equality, and then started to do work on anti-bullying laws, modernization of birth certificates, and all of that is led by community voice. Excuse me, we're not perfect. There's certainly more that we can do. But we most certainly want to ensure that we have pro-equality candidates, that we're pro-justice candidates in office that are going to support us and ensure that Coloradans can thrive. We want to make sure that our BIPOC community members have a voice at the table. We want to ensure that our allies also have a voice, and that that they have the tools and the resources needed to best serve community. I say all the time that, our LGBTQ plus folks are not a monolith. We're literally representative of every identity, race, resident status, ability that's out there. And so when we're talking about LGBTQ issues, we're actually talking about all issues. And it is part of our job to synthesize the information that's coming from community, and use that to ensure policies and protections.
I want to talk a little bit about Club Q. For so many, the attack on Club Q recalled the brutal mass shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida, where a gunman killed 49 people and wounded more than 50 others. And that's more than 6 years later. The shock, the confusion, the loss is still unfathomable. What's your sense of this violence? Could you give us some sense of how the community is grappling with it, how to mitigate future attacks? What's really happening in terms of these types of experiences?
You know, when Pulse happened, it's so interesting to me because um, I was working for a LGBTQ center here in the Denver metro area, and we just had celebrated this. I think it was our 25th anniversary. And I woke up the next morning to the shocking news of what was happening in Florida. Um, and here we are years later, and we as an organization work really hard, have been working very, very hard to support the community. And we actually had closed our offices to take a much needed break.
Mm.
And so I woke up to a text message from a friend of mine from Oklahoma, and it was like it happened all over again. The pride that we have for our community, and then suddenly it was broken, shattered in an instant. We know that we need to do better. These it was just a week later, less than a week later, where there was a shooting in Virginia. We have to do better to protect our community members, because it could be anyone, whether it's Buffalo or Texas. We know that it could be anyone. So there's two issues here. There's one around guns laws and having sensible gun laws and protections so that this doesn't continue to happen. And then we also need to build community and engagement, public education and awareness, so that folks don't feel that they have to go out and harm others for their own glory or hatred or both. That's happening.
Mm. It's such an overwhelming issue. You don't even know where to start, or it's just senseless violence. I've also been wondering about this as a cisgender non-queer person, and if we could sort of help the community generally better understand the role of cisgendered non-queer persons in supporting the movement, what people can do to move the agenda forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing is to know your community. I can't tell you how many times I hear from folks who I don't know. There's no one in my life who's transgender or non-binary, or and the reality is that there probably are folks in your life, and they probably don't feel safe or brave enough to identify. You have to know your community. You have to understand your own identities. Who you are as a cisgender, non-queer person. What are the privileges that you have and allow you the ability to walk through this earth differently? And how do you, that in that same difference that you have to move freely, don't you want that for other people?
Yeah.
And if so, how do you create space for that to happen? The other piece that I would say, because I recognize that when folks demonstrate allyship, sometimes they forget to bring the people with them that they're supposedly supporting.
Yeah.
Listen to them. You want to be listened, just like you want to be heard and listened to. Sometimes you need to take a step back and listen to the community and what they need. Not what you need at the time or what you think you need, but what, really, really taking the step back. Sometimes there's urgency, and other times there needs to be more critical awareness. And that's what needs to happen. And within community as well, as those of us who are cisgender queer folks, we have to do our due diligence as well to ensure that we are protecting our transgender, non-binary, and gender expansive community members. We still have work to do as well. We have some privileges, which allows us to move through the world differently. And just like we want to be treated with respect and kindness and have the ability to thrive, we should ensure that our transgender, non-binary, and gender expansive community members and all in between have that same ability and opportunity. It takes a lot of accountability. It's a lot of heart and kindness, and we have to do better, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah. You talk about privilege and some identities, and I wonder if you can help our viewers understand what it means to be in those spaces, to be making, what are some of the unique experiences for people who are outside of the quote unquote straight privilege, for example? What are some of the vulnerabilities? You mentioned also people might not feel safe. So can you talk to us a little bit about the experiences, the unique experiences of people in the community?
I think I like to say that LGBTQ plus folks are our ancestors' wildest dreams. And I know that we use that term quite a bit, but before
Yeah.
colonization, there were many indigenous communities who had gender expansive community members, had queer identity, and that was taken away from them.
Mm-hmm.
So we're living our lives as freely and as proudly as we possibly can. And in a country, and I can only speak for our country,
Yeah.
um, in a country where you're afraid to live your life, your truth, in the way that our ancestors did. It's who doesn't want to be authentic and live their lives. Now, I want to be clear for any of those folks out there who want to put out some messaging on pedophilia or any of those types of things. And I want to be clear that that is not what I am talking about here by any means of the imagination.
Yeah.
That the ability to live yourself as your authentic self in a way that does not harm others, to express yourself in a way that is outside of boxes and constraints. Absolutely. I want that for our people. I want that for everyone. I want people to be able to express their gender and the love, consentingly love who they want to love. Since that does not happen, people can lose their jobs, people can lose their housing, people can lose their health care because of who they are. We have to be sometimes behind closed doors. And we only have places such as Club Q or Pulse and other clubs to feel safe, to be who we are. And until we can move through this earth freely, those are our homes. Those are our places where we can be seen and heard. I don't know how many times I've heard, well, you can just go to any club and dance. And I know with myself, and this is personal, with my wife, who, we were dealt with a hate crime a few years ago. Being myself can put myself in danger.
Yeah.
Where being at a place like Club Q, I can just be.
Yeah. No, I hear you. You've said elsewhere that you think for those people who are using transgender, non-binary, or gender expansive youth, who are basically attacking for political gain, that it's really, it is an injustice for sure, but it's for talking points. I wonder what you really meant by that.
Yeah, I think that these folks know what they're doing. They're intentional, right? They know that they can say these things. We've seen it in the 70s, and we're seeing it again, where they're using this as a way to get, mainly for political gain, for power, to be seen. We've seen, I don't even know if they even believe what they're saying half the time, to be honest. Right. But they know that they're going to get clicks from this. They know that they're going to get sound bites for this. They know that they potentially could get votes, even if it's not truthful. And so I encourage community members to really take a step back. Like, is this what we want? Attacking LGBTQ plus community members. Is that what you really want? Or is it what you really want is ability to thrive, right? Again, to have clean water, internet access, to those things, to have a well-paying job. Like, I imagine that is what we really want. But when we're disenfranchised and you put out these narratives, then you don't have to be accountable for actually serving our communities, right? You don't have to be accountable to being a servant leader, which is actually what you're supposed to be.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the Colorado Healing Fund. The concerns around the fund taking administrative fees from donations for Club Q survivors. I'm wondering if you want to weigh in on that, and also maybe even provide for our listeners, for our viewers, any other space for those who want to assist survivors.
Sure. This is an interesting one. I was invited to be a part of the advisory committee for the Colorado Healing Fund. And I do believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I do believe that they're not taking administrative costs for Club Q. But I would, reach out to their leaders to specifically clear that up. But what I would also say is this. You have a choice to do with your money what you want to do with your money. There are other places where you want to give and you feel like that is better, then I wholeheartedly support that.
Yeah.
I also know that there are many folks in the community that I have spoken to who feel overwhelmed by GoFundMe pages or you directly sending them money. And there are some folks who have not come out publicly to say that they have been harmed. And so a fund like Colorado Healing Fund or and others creates this ability and a space to be able to disseminate out in a way that makes them feel better. Not everybody is going to agree with that. We're human beings. Human beings are going to human being, and nothing is perfect. And, it's exhausting to expect anybody to be perfect.
Yeah.
This incident was not perfect. It was harmful and dangerous and a crisis and chaos. And I think that anybody out there who's, whatever they're doing to ensure that the community is being supported should be applauded. And there should be an ability and an opportunity to create space for that to happen so these folks can heal in the best way possible.
I read that in your spare time, you're a professor at the University of Denver's Graduate School of Social Work, teaching classes on power, privilege, and oppression, disrupting privilege, community leaders, social justice. I also read that you told me, you shared this in an earlier conversation, that you're actually baking. But to the earlier point, what do policymakers get right or wrong about disrupting privilege and also advocating for social justice?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what we get wrong is that we want to point at our racist grandparents or our transphobic cousin. And the reality is when you're disrupting privilege, you're disrupting your own privilege. The reality is I am a cisgender a woman who is also a citizen of the United States, and I have privilege. And if I want people to treat me well as a Black queer woman, then I need to understand the harm that I have caused and be accountable to that. And use that as a lead to bring in people together to be accountable for their own identities. There are too many people out there who are quick to slam dunk someone for getting something wrong. And when you understand that you have also done wrong, you have more grace. Now, that does not mean that you don't hold folks accountable. But once you start to look within, you're better to be able to create space for folks on the outside.
You are the first Black and female executive director of One Colorado, the state's leading advocacy organization advancing equality for LGBTQ plus Coloradans and their families. Why is this fact important and significant for the movement?
Yeah, I mean, it's very important because many times BIPOC community members, folks with disabilities, transgender community members, non-binary, et cetera, have not felt like even in the movement that they were seen. And, me being here creates a space like many other folks, Nadine Smith and Equality Federation, the executive director in North Carolina. We create a different face. And when you see us, you know that you can be us, right? And you know that we're going to create space for many others to be seen and heard. It does not discount the leadership and the great strives, but now we can even make it better and stronger.
I love that. Nadine Bridges is Executive Director of One Colorado. Nadine, thank you for being here.
It is my absolute pleasure, Dr. Johnson.
And that's it for our program today. Remember, you can follow me and the show on Instagram or Twitter. Thank you so much for watching Feminism Today on Free Speech TV. Join us again next week.